It's Anna from the Randomizer. This should be episode 4, which I think I'll try to say at the front of these from now on. And welcome to my little yarn discussion podcast, whatever you want to call it. And please, if you like this, if you're new, hi, glad to see you here. And if you're returning, I'm glad you're coming back. And like and subscribe. And if you like this and everything, and let's just get right into it. All right. Oh, first things first, what I'm wearing. All right. This is, I made this cardigan last summer in the dead of summer, like in the middle of summer, like July, August time frame. It came up out of the Yarn Randomizer last year. And this is the Big Love Cardigan by Ankestrick. I'm not sure I'm saying that right. But it's just a big, it's got this great, let's see if you can see the pattern. It's got a nice pattern. It's got this nice ribbing and all this detail. It's got, you can see I finished this with this, what do they call that? The tubular bind off here on the sleeves. And also you can see it on the bottom hem here, how that just rolls right over and it looks so great. And so I made this in the dead of summer, last summer, when it came up on the Yarn Randomizer. And what had come up was this really old Manos de Uruguay wool Classica that I had. And I had a lot of it. And so what happened was it came up, and I happened to have in my inventory some really beautiful variegated purple mohair from Superfine Yarn Company. And I know I've mentioned them before, and they're no longer making yarn, but this was just, I think, Moon Dust or something. It's all in my project page, was the color, and I thought it would be, now the wool Classica is this relatively uneven kind of Aran weight single ply from Manos de Uruguay. And I thought the mohair paired with it would kind of smooth it out and also smooth out the variation, because their yarns are also known for being not necessarily a consistent color skein to skein as well. They recommend like interleaving the yarns, alternating rows and so forth and so on. But I just thought, I'll just go for it and combine it with this mohair and see what happens. And as you can see, I think the result is just turned out so nice. It's such cozy, and this is so heavy. I used almost all, I think it's 8 skeins of the Manos de Uruguay, and I used most of 3 skeins of the mohair, and it just came out so nice. Now, I did an alteration to this pattern, and if you go to my pattern page, and I'll link it below, I have similar to some other sweaters I've knit, the actual shoulder line in the sweater is back from the shoulder. And there's a great, one of the folks who knit the sweater has a great write-up, kind of a blog page, where they talk about how they adjusted the length of the armholes on each side to adjust for the fact that the shoulders shifted back. In her pattern, she has extra short rows at the front bottom to adjust for that. But if you do this adjustment at the armholes instead, then you don't have to do the short rows at the bottom, which is what I did. And I actually altered her alteration a little further, because the great thing about Ravelry is all the notes that people write in their patterns. And there were multiple comments about the armholes not being large enough for the sweater. And so instead of just adjusting the placement, kind of the length of the armholes front and back, giving 1 inch less to the back, an additional inch to the front, what I did was I didn't reduce the back, and I added 2 inches to the front in length. And that helped adjust for where this back seam is, and it also let me have larger armholes, and I picked up proportionally more stitches at the armhole edge as well. And so it turned out great. And you can see all those details in my project page. Now I may have to take this off because it's a little warm today. It's a very nice day, and so it's a little warm. So I think I'll do that right now. But yeah, it's a really excellent pattern, and I highly recommend it. And again, this, how this turned out just turned out great. You can again see the wonderful texture, and you can see some of the variations in color and stuff, but I highly recommend the pattern. It's really such a cozy knit. It turned out really nice. Let's see. Okay, so that's what I was wearing. Next would be on to finished objects. I have to figure out where I hid this finished object. Whoops. Oh my goodness. And so I actually finished, if I can even find it, I finished my Sophie shawl. Where did it go? Oh dear. Oh, how about that? It tumbled down onto the floor. All right, so I actually finished my Sophie shawl. So you can see, whoops. And it turned out so nice. And so I think you can see really great color. This is Hypnotic Yarn, Yarnable. I got this in a Yarnable box, and I really recommend the Yarnable subscription. She does some great colorways and great contents on those monthly boxes. And again, I would still be doing it, but too much yarn back there. So this turned out so nice. And I made it, now I made it longer in rows than what's called for in the pattern, but I'm also a tight knitter. I didn't check my gauge too closely. I don't tend to do that as much on little shawls and stuff. So this, I made it a little bit longer, and but it could be that it ended up just the right size. And so it's just a nice little shawl. There's enough extra here to tie. Oh. And I made it a little longer and a little wider than what was called for, but it ended up really nice. I've worn this on multiple occasions now when it's been a little cool outside. And it's really just a nice pattern. I think I finished it in maybe 3 days, was how long it took me. And it's just got such nice little details. You can see how it's got this built-in I-cord edging. And as simple as can be, you just cast on and you start and come to the end and you just cast off, and it's just a very nice, simple, great knitting. I guess the only thing is it's a little less popcorny or potato chip, is it potato chip knitting, than some, because you have to kind of keep track of your increases. And so you got to do those every so often in the pattern, but otherwise, just really, really nice. Really recommend it. I can see why so many people have made it. It turned out really nice. And so that's my one finished object for this podcast. Okay, got my notes, got my little iPad up here so I can actually go right through everything. And oh yeah, okay. And that Sophie scarf, I had jumped ahead of my cue. That was actually Yarn Randomizer choice number 8 for the year, and so it's already done and gone. And for anybody who's new and stuff, I randomly pick yarns. The little bucket you see at the beginning of the podcast with the numbers in it is the way I pick yarns randomly out of my stash. And so I do those picks and I knit those, not necessarily in strict order, but those are the yarns, those are the projects I primarily work on during the year, unless I'm doing a specific gift knit and everything. So that was made from the 8th yarn choice of the year. Now, I'm going to go to yarn choice number 7, and I'm trying to remember if that was, oh yeah, that was a little bit of stitch together. What had happened was yarn choice number 7 corresponded in my stash to some minis that I had from Stitch Together Studio. And again, they're another dyer that I really like. I've knit a lot of things with their yarn, and she does some amazing colorways. And so what I decided to do is take half a mini and put it into my 10 stitch blanket. And so you can see this here. So this nice blue that you see here is the mini that I chose to use. It had about 19 grams in the mini, and so I used about 9. I left over just about exactly 10 grams in that mini. So we'll see what I do with it the next time it comes up. But really pretty, very nice colorway. And so the thing to note about my 10 stitch blanket, you'll see, I'll link it below, and you'll see in the project link, I'm basing my 10 stitch blanket off of a specific person's implementation that as you add these 10 stitch columns, you get this pronounced stitch riding along the top, which I like that detail. You can also see how you do a slip stitch at the edge, so you have a nice well-defined place to pick up the stitch as you're working along this edge. The other thing that happened with this project, and I'm really happy with how that center kind of dark with rainbow blips, it's a rainbow blip, it's another Stitch Together colorway there, goes with the yarns that are in here right now. I think it's all coming together nicely. But one of the things that happened was I was knitting this on a set of 24-inch circulars, just going back and forth, and I just decided I didn't like the cord kind of being there. It was kind of restricting how I was picking up the stitches at this inside edge here. And so I went and decided I don't know, maybe I have one other set of straight double pointed needles. So I got a set of Chow Goo double pointed needles in the size 1.5 to start working this on, and it made it much easier to just kind of pop back and forth on those straights. But yeah, it's a fun little pattern. Yarn will just go into this. If I get little remnants coming up out of my yarn randomizer, they may or may not go into here, depending on if I think it might go with some other thing for a sock or whatever, but I'm happy with this choice. I like the way this blue turned out in here. And normally I'm doing this in fingering weight. The normal weight to do this in is actually DK, and I'm kind of having a little regret about not just doubling up the fingerings and doing this in DK, because that would give me more options. I could use regular DK yarns, I could double fingerings and things like that, but it'll be a nice blanket when it's done, so it'll be okay. The bag that I have this in, just in case anybody's wondering about the bags and stuff, this is from Darn Yarn, Minnesota. I got this quite a while ago, and I love these little bags with the see-through window on there, and so that comes from there, and I've had that quite a while, but I really like it. I'll link Darn Yarn Minnesota down below, so you can shop their bags and stuff, and of course they've got yarn and everything else as well. But that's it. So I consider this kind of a finished object, and this was Yarn Randomizer choice number 7 for the year, and so this goes back into hibernation until another yarn comes up that I want to put in there. So that's it for the finished objects. Next is, let me put that down there, works in progress. So the current, like the Lento sweater is not the elephant in the room, but the big thing that I'm working on. So currently I am working on the sleeves for the Lento sweater, and let me get this facing the right way. So I've actually got the sleeve in progress. Again, every time I put this up, I kind of go, oh, I can't wait till this is done. I got kind of obsessed about a pair of socks, which we'll go over later, which kind of, and doing the Sophie scarf, kind of like, ooh, shiny object, I gotta try that. But I came back to this and I'm working on the sleeve right now, and I think you can see there, the length of sleeve. And so the question was, how much sleeve will I get out of this? Will I be able to do? And so I think I had, what was it? It was about almost half a skein left after I'd finished the body. Let's see what that was. 47 grams. So I had 47 grams left of the fingering. I had plenty of the mohair, more than enough of the mohair. So the limitation was the fingering yarn. And so once I made the body the length I wanted, you can see that, I divided up the yarn, and you can, using my scale. And so what I did was at the midpoint, tie this little knot here. Let's see, yeah. And so basically here's the yarn, and these things are tragic, aren't they? This is the yarn I'm working off of right now, and this is what's for the second sleeve. And I've been able to make I've been relatively surprised about how far I've been able to get. So I have gone, I think, I'm about halfway through the sleeve decreases. And I think I'm going to get those complete. This is going to be past the elbow and will probably be a 3/4 sleeve when I'm done with it. And so I'm looking forward to that. So this is what I'm obsessing a little bit with right now. As soon as I get this first sleeve done, I'll post an image of that to Instagram. But I wanted to show you how I go about kind of estimating. So you have, limited amount of yarn, and you're trying to make, say, for example, a sleeve as long as possible. And I believe I brought up here, yeah, right there. Okay, so let's see, let's sit this way. One of the things I did was I made a spreadsheet. Now I'm going to hold this up to the screen. Let's see how well this works. And so, yeah. So basically what I have is kind of the number, as I'm working the rows in the sleeve, I have the number of stitches and the cumulative total of the stitches. And I should have in here, yes, how much the yarn weighed. Let's go away from there. How much was the weight of the yarn when I started? Then I did 15 rows and I weighed it afterwards. And so when I did 15 rows here early on the sleeve, it only took just under 6 grams of yarn. And so what I've done is I've done the rest of the rows, and again, done a cumulative, like what are the total number of stitches, and you're getting the reflection of my light in here. Let's see. But I'll share a link to this so you can take a look at it. But now, based on that and how much yarn that I had left, I should be able to complete the rest, because those first 15 rows I measured how much yarn I used on are the wider rows. The rows are getting narrower, and so subsequent rows are going to use less. And so I believe I'm going to measure again after the next 15 rows, see how much yarn that used up, and see if I have enough to do the rest of the decreases. There'll only be 2 more after that. And then once I do those 2 decreases, I'm going to check again how much I've got left after that. But I think I'm pretty certain, because I'm hedging my bets here, I'm pretty darn certain I'll be able to do all the decreases on the sleeve and then do the ribbing, if not immediately after, maybe even a few rows. Maybe I add some more rows. But I'm surprised how far the yarn is taking me on the sleeve, and I'm pretty pleased with that. And so, but I will tell you right now, when I finish this sleeve, when I get down to the cast off edge, I will not be casting it off. I'll do the second sleeve first, and then once I know I was able to get the same length with both, because even though I'm weighing the yarns and everything, yarn isn't always consistent by weight. This is, although this is applied yarn, and it should be pretty consistent, there's always a chance things could be off. So that way we'll see if I need to adjust back and forth between the 2 sides. But I expect to get this done before the next podcast. Maybe I've said that last time, but definitely this time. I was just distracted by other things. So yeah, I'm really happy. It's just so squishy and soft. I do love the fold over collar. It's so nice and so stretchy, and Really recommend this pattern. As other people say, there is some funkiness around after you do the short rows, when you go around to doing in the round, where those increases line up, I think is needs a little tweak on this one side. But and I should probably try to write something a little clearer in my notes about what needs to happen there. And I'll try to include that there. But I really recommend the pattern. It's such a nice pattern, particularly if you want to do one of these sweaters with a fingering and a mohair on big needles. Most people would do this on 10. I'm doing 10.5 because I'm a tight knitter. But this is a great one because there's no lace. It's a nice raglan structure, and so it just gives you a lot of sweater for the yarn, and really just feels amazing. And so highly recommended. All right, so that's where that one's at. And that's Yarn Randomizer project number 2. All right. Yarn Randomizer, I feel like not saying it. Yarn Randomizer project number 3 for the year was using this Christmas set from 2021 from Les Garçons. And I have, set that there. I have completed the first repeat of the pattern. So you can see, I got up to here. So you see there's always this, using the Surrey to separate each section, but now I'm on the alternating stripes with the next colorway that I'm using from the set. And so basically I'm at least 1/8 of the way done with this now, and I'm pretty happy with it. So it's going to repeat the same way, stripes, and then 2 things of lace, 1 in each of these colors, with separations with the Surrey on each section. So it's been a really nice pattern. One of the things I did want to point out is, I know I mentioned last time about how make one left and make one right, certain types of increases or knit through the front and back will scavenge yarn from stitches on the previous row. And this shawl is an absolute perfect example of that happening. On each side of this spine here, there is a make one left and make one right on the front rows. Now you see, let's see if we can get this in there clear. All right. I don't know how well I might do I'll do a good picture in the project page, but you see how it's got that kind of loop, like big stitch, small stitch, big stitch, small stitch look. The reason behind that is that when you do that make one left and make one right on each side of that stitch on the previous row, you're pulling up a lot of the yarn that's there and tightening up that center stitch. And so you'll get that look where on the right side, the previous row will look extremely tightened up as you work your way across, and then the purl row always looks that loop, not the purl row, the knit row, the row you're working will look normal, but the wrong side row from the previous side will get snugged up, and so you'll see that alternating pattern. Let's see, there was something else. That the same thing was present on that I'm working on. Oh yes, the socks, and I'll show that to you there as well. Might be more detailed than you want to know, but I'm kind of fascinated by it, and I still need to do a technique video about how you can avoid that. And it's just a matter of personal preference, how you want things to look and that kind of thing. But it's interesting. I'm really interested in the kind of engineering or the structure behind knitting, how things work. And so I think it's a detail that's fun to kind of think about and use it when you want to, and then, or avoid it when you don't want it to happen. So again, rambling here. So that's Yarn Randomizer project number 3. So I've used up one of the 8 contrast colors, so I'm on to the next one. And so I'll continue to make steady progress on that. That's my one shawl project. And so for folks who don't know, I tend to have one of each type of project kind of in process, is what I like to do. So let me set this one down. All right, next, my muscle burrow, so my hat. So this is the hat that I'm working on right now, and this is Yarn Randomizer project number 4. I'm going to say that so often it's going to sound like nonsense after a while. All right. So I'm a little over halfway through my muscle burrow for this yarn. And again, this is Blue Barn Fiber in this wonderful September Aspens colorway. And oh goodness, I really like it. And it's been staying pretty consistent on keeping this running stripe that's going through it. And I'm really happy with that. And it's an interesting yarn. I think it's got a real tight twist to it. And so it has this real pronounced texture. See here, even though this is knit fabric, you can see it's got a ridgy kind of texture to it, which is kind of interesting. It would be interesting to see if that eases up a little bit when I block it, but I'm going to attempt to put this on a little bit now. Nope, not going to work. Oh, it's not enough to work with here. All right. I kind of tried it earlier. Maybe I folded more in there. Hold on for a second. Turning red with embarrassment here. All right. Maybe this will work a little better. Kind of getting there. We'll see. I got a little sideways there, but really happy. And this muscle burrow, once you get past your increase area, this is great. Just mindless knitting. Great for TV watching and that kind of thing. And so I've been really happy with that, and just pick that up anytime I need a project that needs to be on the go with me. Or if there's something on TV that I'm watching and I just need something relatively plain, this is the project that gets picked up. So I'm hoping to finish this up pretty quickly. But real happy, really recommend that pattern. It's so great. It's so great to just take any yarn you want, work up, start it, look at the measurement of it, what the gauge is ending up, and being able to just make basically it tells you, you know, this gauge you're getting, here's what you need to do to get these sizes. So it's a really wonderful pattern, and I highly recommend that stuff. All right, now here's the pattern I've been a little obsessed with over the past, I think, couple of weeks. So I had to cast on another pair of socks, and I think last time I showed that I had this Croy, and I'm dragging these needles on the table. Hold on. I had this Croy in this really nice green stripe rag, and so I'll give you a shot looking at that. I'm doing toe up, and so the yarn randomizer pick, let's see, it was, yeah, this was yarn randomizer number 10, was just this leftover of this gray marl that I had, and I decided to use it, so I'm using it in contrast toes and heels. And I'm just about right at, I'm 2 rows away from starting the turn, the heel turn, and the flap, heel flap. And so this is a mock cable socks. Did I write? Oh, Wendy Johnson, from her book, Socks from the Toe Up. I really like the book. I've made a lot of socks from that book. But gosh, this texture is like gorgeous. I love this, the way this looks. And I've altered the pattern a little bit. This is a size between the 2 sizes she has in the pattern. So I've got basically 35 stitches on each side, 70 total. And I've actually added an extra cable in the front and just putting 2 pearls between each 3-stitch cable. And I'm happy with how that's turning out. And I've been working to get these yarns kind of running in sync. So I think I'm doing pretty good. They're about 1.5 rows off from each other up at the top. But when I do the turn and heel flap, I'm going to see if I can't make sure it gets kind of back, make sure it's in closer alignment. It's not something you'd really notice, I think, anybody would look that close at your feet when you're wearing socks. But the typical of the Peyton's Croy, this has got a real rustic feel, very woolly, very heathery stuff, and really, I've forgotten how nice it was to knit with Croy socks. My only concern is I may not have enough of this gray marl to do the turn and heel flap. And I looked to see there's some available in the gray marl at the Joann Fabrics that's near me. So I think what I'll do is oh, and the other thing to mention is you probably obviously know I'm knitting these 2 at a time, but on 2 separate sets of needles. When I knit socks, I use 2 circulars and do them that way. So I'm knitting them at the same time to help me keep an eye on keeping them in sync, and I'm tracking the number of rows on the back. What I'm doing with this set is I'm doing basically 8 rows a day on each sock. And the nice thing about 8 rows a day is that it moves along faster than you might think. It's not, to me, it's not a lot to ask to do 8 rows a day on each sock. And it just kind of goes along. And so I'm already up to the point where I'm doing the turn in the heel flap. So that I'll have ready to show for next time, maybe even a finished pair of socks, we'll see. But yeah, very nice. Ending up, this is such a nice self-striping from Croy. Really neat. And it does stripe consistently. Different than the Croy FX, can be a little unpredictable and not likely to get identical socks from that. But yeah, great pattern, great yarn. Really, I'm sitting here saying great yarn with the Croy yarn. Croy yarn is great for what it's for, and I wouldn't say it's not the nicest yarn out there, but I like it for socks and stuff. And wool I don't have a problem with the wool feeling itchy for the most part. In fact, the only socks that have ever felt itchy on my feet are ones that have alpaca in them, oddly enough. So that's all the works in progress, and conspicuously absent here is my motorcycle sweater for my husband. So I have been delinquent on that front. For some reason, I got to get past a motivational kind of thing and get back to that. I've got it. It's all set up over there, ready to work on, and I just got to get down to it. And it could be that once I finish the socks, I'll make that my daily requirement, my knitting tax. So I've talked about this before. Sometimes I'll assign a daily knitting tax where I have to work on something, make some progress on something before I can work on the fun stuff. Yeah, it's definitely, the motorcycle sweater is more of a chore, but it's also a labor of love since it's for my husband. And I'll be so psyched to see him wear it. But yeah, I gotta get down to it. Okay. All right. So outside of that, I actually have picked 3 more yarn randomizer picks. So I've got, so we'll go over those right now. All right. So the first chip that my husband pulled out of the container was 214. And that ended up being, this was a yarn. This is from Mandy's Making, and I'll link her below, on Etsy, and she has a lot of really nice colorways. And this one was a little different. This is a non-superwash marled wool here, and I can't remember if there's any nylon content in here or not, but it's a relatively loosely plied, if you can see that. And I've got a pair of socks that I made out of that I'll probably show at some point. I'm going to tease about a sock retrospective here. But so I have this, and it's a good chunk of the yarn left over. Maybe it's about maybe half or a little less than half the skein left. So I was thinking about what I wanted to do with this, and so I had visited my sons in Austin, Texas. They live in Austin, Texas, all together in the same apartment, all 3 of them. And they have their cats. They have 2 of the old cats that they grew up with there with them, and also a new cat, the cat with no name, that they have. And you'll see pictures on my Instagram. There's definitely a picture of the cat with no name with a knit toy that I made for them. So when I visited, I brought stuff for the cats. And so our typical thing we'd make for the cats that the boys are familiar with is I'll take an old sock, I'll take an entire big tub of catnip and stuff it all into an old sock and just tie the end of the sock into a knot. So it's just a massive amount of catnip in a sock, and I brought that with me, and the cats just absolutely loved it. And so I had this idea. It was pretty funny. The cats would come out and lay down on top of this sock filled with yarn. It was a sock filled with yarn, sock filled with catnip, and it was funny. It was very cute, and I thought, you know what I need to do is I need to make a stuffy, some kind of stuffed animal that's filled with catnip, so that when they come out and play with it and lay on it, it looks like they're cuddling up with a pet, like a little toy. So I looked around at patterns and I didn't see anything I particularly liked. So I decided I would make up a cat stuffy pattern, sort of inspired by the sock monkey kind of look. And so this is my idea. So I've got some proportions drawn out. So this really sophisticated sketch, but this is the idea. And so I'm going to make it, you know, in certain proportions, similar to a sock monkey size, do a little embroidery on it and stuff, but I'm going to fill the body with some stuffing, but lots of catnip. And I will do that. So the thing you have to be careful about stuffing a knitted object with catnip is it's just going to leak out of there as the cat plays with it. So I will sew a fabric filled packet that I'll put inside there. And so what I'm hoping is I'll do this, make this out of this yarn, do some embroidery on it, fill it, send it off to the boys, and get some shots of the cats kind of laying with this stuffy, which I think will be pretty funny. Once I come up with how this is going to work, I'll probably make a spreadsheet for it, and that'll all be available if you want to try it. It'll be available. I'll put it there. I've got one other project that I have where I made a pattern. I just made a pattern up for a hat, a bulky weight hat. And so anytime I do that, it'll just be right in my project, and you can go take a look at it. And if you want to try it out, you're welcome to, and everything. But yeah, so I'm going to make up a cat stuffy pattern and make a cat stuffy out of that, out of this nice marled yarn, which will be fun. All right, so now the next choice that came out of the yarn randomizer was, I can't even read this reversed on the screen, 242. And that also came up with a remnant out of my yarn. And so it came up with this bulky weight yarn that I had. Now, I had made a dog sweater with this yarn. Actually, should I bring that up? Let's see, I might be able to find that. And so it ended up looking really funny. I made it for my mother's dog, Odo, who is a real cutie. And so let's see if we can get that up there. So you can see Odo wearing his little sweater. I'll link that below. And it turned out really nice and stuff, but I don't have a ton of this, just a little bit of this left. And so I looked around. I didn't think there was any of my other bulky yarns. I don't have a ton of bulky yarns. And so I didn't think there were any of the bulkies that I would just combine this with. And so I looked around for patterns that use small amounts of bulky yarn, and I happened upon a coaster pattern. And the coaster pattern actually uses, let's see if I got... It uses a strand of bulky and a strand of worsted. And I thought, I have this leftover worsted from the fiber seed that I think will go really well with this. And so in my queue, I've already got it queued up in link. I'm going to make as many coasters as I can out of this combination of yarn. And so they're nice little round coasters that are garter stitch. And so that'll be a nice project that I can just be one of those really fast, satisfying projects I can do. And so that's what's going to happen with this yarn. All right. And then finally, last, oh, and that, you know, that reminds me, I need to talk about another pick. I'm going outside the notes here. But one more, I got one more to do as far as new picks. And so my husband pulled 137. And so, and I'm trying to not do that little click. My husband pulled this mohair out of my stash. And so this was mohair. When I visited my sons, we went to Gage Yarn Shop down there in Austin, Texas, and I picked up this mohair there to go with the yarn that I picked up at the shop. And the yarn was this, can you see it? It's Dream in Color. I think Dream in Color. And yes, Dream in Color. And the name of this yarn is Lamb. And it is kind of a, between almost more of a sport weight. It is, see, it is 100% New Zealand wool. And it's got 380 yards per skein. And you can see how it's got this nice, almost, it's like a greenish, but with some brown in there. And I think this Ito picks up that brown and will be a nice combination with this yarn. So as it turns out, so he picked this out. And for anybody who's new, when yarn gets picked out of my yarn randomizer, I'm free to combine it with any other yarn in my stash. I just have to work with it. And in this case, it already had a partner, so to speak. And so I've got 2 skeins of this, and I've got 3 of this, and it will be, I think, a Love Note or a ranunculus, or there's some other ones that are out there too that use a similar combination of like a fingering and a mohair that I might do. Now, update, what I wanted to do is, actually I do have it in my notes, so I'm not going too far off script here. So this is Yarn Randomizer pick number 13, unlucky, for the year. And so I'm really excited about that. I'm really looking forward to working with that. Now, actually I'm going to step away for a moment. Previously on the Yarn Randomizer, we had talked about this. This is, I believe, Yarn Randomizer 10 pick. And the pick was this mohair that I got, this drops mohair. And this is, was it Working Sock Sport? Some unusual Madeline Tosh yarn, sock, sport weight yarn that's been discontinued, but I've got 2, and these skeins are pretty substantial. They're closer to 200 grams than 100, and they have 400 yards each in here. But the weight, even though it's called a sport weight yarn, is really more, the yardage per weight is more akin to a DK. And if you read the comments, we've talked about this before, that's what the case is. And I'm still noodling about what to do with this combination yarn. And I think what it's down to is my worry about doing a ranunculus or a Love Note or anything that calls for a fingering and a mohair is this is going to be denser. And is it going to have the same kind of look and feel to it if I do that? So the real critical thing to do here that'll need to happen before I can really make a pick on what to do here is I need to do a gauge swatch. And what I'll do is I'll do an in the round gauge swatch, and I'm going to do a plug for my technique videos. I have a video on how to do an in the round gauge swatch without having the strands across the back of the swatch. And so once I make that swatch and block it, I'll bring it back on here and show it to you, and it'll give us a better idea on what to kind of do with this yarn. So we'll figure it out. I don't know if you can hear it outside. There's one car in the neighborhood that always has their music, has really loud bass to it, and they're going by right now. Yep, there they go. You can hear them from like half a mile away. So I don't know if you can hear it, but you get to hear that a couple of times a day. Even though we're out here in the middle of nowhere, that car comes by and it's always blasting that stereo as loud as possible. Okay, so that's an update on this one. And I'm still thinking about it. And so that's all that. I have no acquisitions, although guilty confession, I did pick up a Les Garçons yarn that'll be coming, and I'll show it when it's here. other than that, no acquisitions. One of the things I did want to talk about, and I have it in my notes here. So I put my first really small video, it's just like a little 4 minutes long, where I'm fixing up a drop stitch on my socks. And what I'm going to try to do more consistently is if I'm doing a fix on my knitting that's something I haven't recorded before, I'm going to try to have the patience, instead of fixing it on the spot, to record the fix, record fixes when I do them. So this isn't going to be a set of videos where I'm going to, look for examples to give. This is just going to be as they come up, and I'll do them. And so if you haven't seen that one, again, may not be particularly useful for you. It's just picking up a little, the cable stitch go, boop, fell off I was not paying attention. I was distracted and lost a stitch, and I had to go back and retrieve this cable stitch that was sticking off the front of the sock. Fortunately, it just happened the row before. The shawl retrospective, I'm getting that lined up for part 3, which will have some really beautiful shawls in there to take a look at. So I'm continuing on those. And then I did my first stash kind of look at, I can't even, now I'm trying to remember what they call that, but showed all of my lace weight yarn and all of my light fingering yarn that's classified as light fingering. I have enough fingering yarn that I'm not going to I'm not going to try to do it in one sitting. Close to I think just shy of 200 different fingering weight yarns, and so I'll do that in 2 parts and go through that, and then I think I'll be able to do the rest of it in one, maybe in one shot for the everything sport weight and above, but we'll see. But the sock weight one will be coming, and then what I wanted to tease about a little bit was I went on a hunt this past week to try to find every pair of hand-knitted socks in the house. And actually, for a while, there was one pair that was eluding me that I was really puzzled about. I could not imagine what had happened to those socks. Well, I finally found them today. And so for fun, what I did was I pulled together all of my hand-knit socks that are in the house. Okay, so I'm gonna... This weighs a lot more than I expected it to. Okay, so let's see how we do this here. And again, the crazy sock lady probably I know she has a bazillion more socks than I've made, but this is let's see, can I see it? Yes. Every pair of socks in the house. I'm holding one pair out that I'm going to show you, but what I'll do is I'll do a little retrospective of the socks, because there's a lot of interesting stuff in here to talk about. And I'll take a photo of that to be the kind of intro photo for those, but I'm starting to plan that out. Now, the little will kind of end I think the podcast with this. So, I had not really knitted socks. I really disliked working with double pointed needles, and stuff. And I was not somebody who knew what magic loop, or working, I've got yarn fluffs flying around here. I did not know what magic loop was until, about 4 or 5 years ago, actually, because I had just been kind of knitting. I wasn't plugged into Ravelry. In that community, I was just kind of out in the wilderness. No. But, and so, I learned about using double pointed needles, and that's my favorite method now, is two double pointed needles. I like it better than magic loop. Personally, it works for me well. I've tried this 9-inch circulars, and as much as some people like them, don't work for me. Is it for folks with stiffer hands, and like so many people as you get older, I've definitely got some level of arthritis in my joint here of my thumb back at my wrist, and trying to scrunch up with something like that just not working. So I endeavored to try to make a pair of socks, and this was before I started doing magic loop. So I made a pair of socks with some double pointed needles, I'm trying to think of 2017 or something like that. And I made these socks for my husband. I'm going to show them to you in a moment. And so what happened to these socks is Hermione's Everyday Sock. It's a wonderful pattern, snipped from the top down. Got a great texture, and I used some old stash yarn that I had that was called Superwash. And now Superwash, generally, I don't put socks through the dryer. But what happened to these poor socks was they went through the wash and the dry. So this is what remains of my Hermione's Everyday Socks that I knit for my husband. They definitely do not fit my husband anymore. They've felted up a little bit from going through the washer and the dryer. And they're really looking rough around the edges. You see a lot of other material kind of stuck in there and everything. And so I wear these as house slippers at this point. But it's really kind of a tragedy. Poor things. I remember when I pulled them out of the dryer, I was like, oh no. But that is the first pair of socks I made however many years ago, and this is what remains of them. And we'll go over that in the sock retrospective as well. So I think that is all that I had. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch these. I hope you're finding interesting information and inspiration, and at least maybe having a little fun. I know I enjoy watching other folks' podcasts really well. You know, I think I'll just take one. I've mentioned a couple of podcasts in here, but I'll mention one more. And I think it's Heckaroni. I'm not going to remember the name of it, but it's The Knitting Nurse, I believe. But I'll link the podcast below. I really enjoy, she actually gets her podcast out pretty consistently just about every week. And I really enjoy watching her podcast as well. It's one of those things where I'll put on a podcast, I'll sit down and knit, and I always see stuff that gives me great ideas in the podcasts that I watch. And so I really appreciate the work people put into them. And I hope this does the same for some of you. So thanks for spending your time. Like and subscribe, and enjoy your knits.